When soldering, you want to have a physical connection as well as a soldered connection for strength and durability. So what I always do is make a little J bend in the wire so that they physically hook together, and I give them a little twist to make sure they're nice and secure. And that's kind of what you end up with. And then you'll solder here, obviously. And a little trick I learned: you almost need 3 hands when you're soldering. You need 2 to hold the wire and 1 to hold the soldering gun. So you can use a old spray can cap, cut some notches in it like that with some scissors, and you just set your wire in it. It'll hold it for you. And then you just solder that joint. Don't forget to put your heat shrink on your wiring before you start soldering, otherwise you'll have to cut it and redo it. I've forgotten 1,000 times, so I always triple check it. And proper soldering technique is you touch the soldering iron to your solder joint, and let it heat up. And then you touch your solder to the joint and you let the solder be drawn into the wire. What you don't want to do is touch the solder to the soldering iron early on, because you'll get a cold solder joint, which is no good. It'll eventually give you trouble. Melting my can over here. You gotta be careful with that lid. And you just touch it, kind of give it a test to see if it's ready, and it'll start drawing the solder right into the joint. Just like that. There you go. Once you have the joint soldered, I always put heat shrink over it to protect it. It's just rubber tubing. I'm going to use a lighter, but a heat gun is really the right way to do it. I just don't have one. This is the way I've always done it, so that's the way I'm going to do it today. Doesn't take much. Just wave the lighter kind of around your heat shrink till it draws up around the wire. That's what you'll end up with. A nice protected joint. And then of course I'll put corrugated wire loom over all of this, so it'll have another layer of protection as well. I've got my circuit lines that need to run to the cab of the car extended, and now I'm just putting on the wire loom. It's got a split in it. You just feed the wires in. It's probably not required. I like it for the protection, number one, but also it just makes everything look factory. So I'll get those 2 wires inside and run them to the cab of the car. The LC1 comes with a small status LED and a momentary push button switch. That's used for the free air calibration settings on the unit. Basically every 5,000 miles or so, you want to take the O2 sensor out of the exhaust but leave it connected to the LC1, and then you push this button for 3 seconds and it activates the free air calibration function. What this button does is when you press it, it grounds the LC1. It sends a ground signal which tells it to then go into that free air calibration. Basically what that does is it has the O2 sensor read fresh air without any exhaust, and it notes that value, and then that's how it knows to calibrate to the air-fuel ratio readings. It keeps it accurate. It's really easy to hook up. You drill a 3/8 hole for the button and a 5/32 inch hole for the LED, and I put a little dab of glue around the LED just to make sure it didn't go anywhere. And then the LED has a positive and a negative line. The 2 black wires, black wire from the switch and black wire from the LED, are soldered together. Now I've extended this so it looks a little bit more complicated than it really is. There's my solder joint. Now this side right here will go to the black wire of the LC1, which is the free air calibration wire. Basically all I did is solder these 2 wires together along with an extension. The reason I put that extension on there is because this panel that I mounted it in is the driver's side footwell kick panel. and this comes out. And so I wanted to give myself plenty of wire so that if I ever have to take this panel out, it's not a problem. And normally I would solder everything, but on this particular connection, I'm probably going to cut these wires off about here, and then I'm going to use spade connectors, insulated spade connectors on the ends, and that way if I ever have to take this panel out, I can just unplug these. It's just a ground, basically a ground wire for the LC1's free air calibration, so it's not critical that it be soldered. And here's the completed panel with the loom on it. So basically I'll keep that coiled up, and then these will run up to the one will go to ground, and one will go to the LC1 free air calibration ground, and it'll be coiled up in there like that. If I ever have to take this panel off, it'll uncoil and give me about 1.5 feet or a foot or so of room to extend, and then the two spade connectors will be on the end to unplug. Here's where I decided to mount the autometer dimmer. This is going to dim the boost gauge so that it matches the factory dash illumination. Like I was saying before, the autometer gauges with LED lighting are really bright at night, and this allows you to dim it. That was the best place I could find. It's connected with zip ties to that cable right there, so it should be pretty stationary. Get the light out of the way. And then when the carpet goes back over, it's almost hidden. You can just reach in there and turn the dimmer to get it set where you want it. It's usually a set and forget. I mean, you don't play with it a lot, so it's fine to have it hidden out of the way. You only set it the one time, and once you get it the brightness the way you want it, you'll leave it alone. And then the wiring I'll run up, and of course put corrugated tubing around it, and I'll run it and follow this factory wiring up. And then the purple wire, which is a 12-volt source wire, will connect to that orange and gray wire right there. You can see the spot where I've been testing. I had to find one that got 12 volts when the parking lights were on, and that's just the switch, headlight switch, and it just pops right out. Used the dash pry tool and it popped out. And then I tested the lines until I found the one, and it's gray or orange with gray stripe. I've started building the wire harnesses for the gauges. On the autometer boost gauge, it's a mechanical, so all it has is a positive 12 volt and ground, and that's just for lighting the gauge up. It actually gets the boost reading from a nylon tube. There's the tube, and it plugs into that compression fitting right there. It's the same one I used on the 4Runner. It works great. It's very simple, so I like it. And like I say, it's just the C2 boost gauge. And I used spade connectors on these and extended the wiring out so that I can connect it all together. I used white for the positive 12 volt because that's the same color as the autometer dimmer. Positive 12, it will connect to that, will also be white. On the Aeroforce, it's got two, it's got an 8-pin connector at the bottom and a 3-pin connector on the top. The 8-pin connector is for the OBD2 wire. And then the top 3-pin is for this. The middle wire, the red, is for switched 12 volt power. Some vehicles you can just hook up to OBD2 and it works fine. On the Challenger, for whatever reason, that tends to cause the battery to drain. So I'm going to use that red wire for switched 12 volt power, meaning it will only be powered up when the car is running. Looking at the back of that 3-pin connector, the other 2 pins, the right hand side, or the green wire, is for analog input 1, which is what will connect the LC1 wideband to. The white wire is for analog input 2, and that will be the pin on the far left up there. That one won't be used, so I'll just tuck it out of the way. And then there's my little T connector. And you can see it just snaps around the wire and plugs in like that. And that's how we'll get our gauges to light up when the parking lights come on. With the factory gauges, everything will light up at the same time. That will connect to that orange with gray stripe wire on the headlight switch that I showed you earlier. One other thing to note on the Aeroforce Interceptor is that in order to use the switched 12 volt power source, the red wire that I showed you, you have to remove that little red jumper, and that just pops right off.